This conference will
And I'll
now be
back
recorded.
on to, look at our note, just if there's things that we can follow up on, even with our agency folks here, brainstorming, kicking around some ideas from what we're hearing. Hopefully this will generate some ideas and we can move from today and move forward on some different projects. So with that, I'll just get into it, or not. Let's hit that button. So in 1928, Hugh Hammond Bennett, considered kind of the person that started the movement for our federal level conservation service. They started out with the road experiment stations. There was a number of them around the nation, I think about 11. He found that to teach farmers new conservation efforts, there's a long distance between where they lived and these experiment stations. So it was not working to try to get the technical services, the technical knowledge out on best management practices, conservation practices. That's where it started. This was an interesting law that in 33, codes of fair competition was started. But along with that, there was some soil and coastal erosion program within that law. That triggered some stuff for us. The Soil Erosion Service was established. So we were, for about a year, the Soil Erosion Service with a federal agency under Department of Interior. Right now we're under USDA, Department of Agriculture. There was a debate about federal tax dollars being used on private lands at the time. There was consternation about that. A lot of the funding went out through Works Program Administration and these different corps that actually hired people to do work on public lands. So you see a lot of projects on public lands back in the day that they put people to work. Dust Bowl era, the Depression. In 34, there was a special committee on soil conservation that declared the funds used on private lands was legal. There was a lot of discussion back and forth. Can you take federal tax dollars and put them on private lands? They did recommend to move us from underneath the Department of Interior under the Department of Agriculture. In 1935, I'll bring up a couple bullet points. Soil Conservation Act was passed because in 35, Supreme Court said, you remember that 1935, the previous law, the fairness deal? Well, that's unconstitutional. Well, this law also included our authorization to exist. So there was two parts of that. They got rid of one, and they created the Soil Conservation Act to keep going the other part, which is us. So a bit of political history there. Some other things that happened, Flood Control Act. There's a lot of small dams, flood control systems across the nation that our agency was involved in. In Douglas County, we have over there in Sutherland, a couple small dams. They've been going through to upgrade them to the next seismic level, basically. I know you folks with this levee out here, it was built in 69, 70, something like that, by the Corps of Engineers. But you're going through a improvement for that, right? Right. That was under FEMA study. Right. So similar but different. So we kind of did things in the uplands, and then Corps of Engineers did a lot of stuff in the lower elevation, irrigation systems and whatnot. For the soil and water conservation districts, Hammond Bennett, Blakeman, I think I've got an article back here on the lawyer that helped create the template from the federal level to give to the states, because the feds knew they couldn't dictate at the local level how to develop a locally led process. So they said, well, here's states, here's an idea. A lot of states picked this up, the Soil Conservation District law. So that's what happened. And then in 1937, first conservation district was formed, which happened to be Hugh Hammond Bennett's area, maybe something like that, or close. I don't remember. In 39, Oregon adopted that template, that legislation to enact soil conservation districts. And so here in 53, the Umpqua district was started. Is that right, Rhonda?
That's correct.
Okay. Douglas County had a north and a south. Then they combined. And then in 63, water was added. So it was a soil conservation district, and then water added soil and water conservation districts. There was a Watershed Protection and Flood Control Act that our agency's been involved in. And there's that 11,000 dams, 200 or over 2,000 watershed type projects. Rural development and recreation, not just agriculture, but the integration of agriculture and all sorts of stuff. So they still exist, but our agency kind of tossed the funding. So now there's councils, RCND councils, but they're no longer administered staff by NRCS. So that has changed since that was started back in the day. Natural resources inventory. So once a year, our agency will drop some random pins out on the ground across the nation and have people request permission from the landowners to determine what is it. Is it what type of grass is, what type of cover is it? So to basically watch the trend of land cover over the nation. That kind of leads to some of the budget decisions. It leads to some other things at the federal level. If they see a huge trend in going from grass to dirt, or urbanization, things like that, that's political. But that was something that's been started. And so every year, you might get a letter. It says, hey, can we come to your property to do an inventory? It's probably, I don't know, some of the other offices can comment on it, but it's 50-50 on whether or not they get permission. Probably for me, from my experience. 1977 reports back to Congress on the conditions of these soil and water and conservation across the non-federal lands. Food Security Act, that was a biggie for us. That was a time where the agencies decided to put a little bit of stick. In 1985, December of 85, was a cutoff. From that point on, if you dewatered a wetland, if you created a bunch of soil erosion, you need to fix it before we're going to use any federal dollars on your property. So we still have that rule. In fact, it's a form. Anybody, new participants, fill that out to make sure you're eligible and are compliant with this. Conservation Reserve Program, that started out as a Midwest whole field erosion control program. My family in Ohio was in it for like 22 years. It definitely changed. I did a lot of mowing. Interesting to watch the transition of those lands, go to blackberries, trees. You have to keep the trees out on those whole field type CRP lands. But we have that program here in a way that that's the parent. We have a continuous sign up program within that deals more in like filter strips and buffers. You can sign up at any time. And then Oregon added some state lottery dollars to that program. And it's called the Conservation Reserve Enhanced Program. The enhanced part is when you have a state adopting it and adding some funding to it. So that's here. They reorganized this, changed our name from Soil Conservation Service to Natural Resources Conservation Service. Since then, now we have these acronyms. We'll go into a few of those a little more, but Environmental Quality Incentives Program, Conservation Stewardship Program, Agriculture Land Easements, basically, Resource Conservation Partnership Program. There's a whole plethora of programs within our agency. We use the Conservation Stewardship Program and EQIP mostly here in Douglas County. I think these two are most applicable to you folks here to start with. If you start to get really organized in the community and have a lot of projects to do, there's an opportunity to go after a greater level of funding from our agency to do a bang-up job within a 5-year period, let's say, for a community. And that utilizes EQIP, CSD, etc. And there's a website here, USDA.gov, farmers.gov. And that's on the presentation, by the way, for reference. Just some of the practices we've been implementing, Douglas and Josephine County. Primarily, our workload in our office has been a lot to do with forestry, non-industrial forest, because of the wildfire concerns. We've done irrigation systems, we've done crop, pasture, etc. For you folks, it's probably definitely more of a little grazing, local food production, high tunnel, smaller produce ideas we will talk about today. I want to hear from you. Remember the argument about using federal tax dollars on private lands. What's the public benefit? Well, here it is. Because we need to point to these and say, why is reducing soil erosion important for the public? Well, it can affect fisheries. It can affect your production on your cropland if you're losing all your good topsoil. Therein lies the argument from Hammond Bennett had and convinced Congress, I think with Senator Buchanan from Texas. So we need to deal with this because it's a national defense issue. If we're losing all of our topsoil due to poor crop practices, wind erosion, how are we going to sustain an army? You can't feed them. That was the argument he made to get this stuff moving. And so that's why we have these types of resource concerns. And there's to be some sort of public benefit shown because we're using federal dollars. But certainly it needs to fit your own operation. There needs to be kind of a multifaceted benefit in a way. And so soil, water, air, plants, and animals, we deal with energy as well in there. There's other factors. In Oregon, the locally led process, like today, we need to generate some ideas and we try to develop that in conjunction with your district's long-range plan. We update our long-range plans for the agency, trying to identify which direction we're going in the community, and then potentially develop a strategy for the area. So we might have a Reedsport area conservation implementation strategy that we can develop for some specific reasons that the community has kind of bought into it. Our planning process with individuals, you go out, what's the objectives, what's the problems, come up with some ideas, implement those ideas. How did it work? Feedback loop. So that's just a glorified, what's the problem? Let's do something about it. How did it work? Process. There's on our website our current office's contact information. There's a rural development and a farm service agency within our same building that covers this area. Though there's some other support from other offices for rural development, which is more like low interest loans for homes. Farm service agency does do loans for like beginning farmers, ranchers. If you want more information about that, let me know, and then we can get Karsten. She's with FSA to deal with that. That is the end of my presentation. Any questions thus far? Andy is next, right? I was just using the arrows.
Okay.
Otherwise, you can click on that.
All right. So I'm Annie Marion. I'm the district conservationist for NRCS out of Wildport, as I mentioned. And I'm just going to talk a little bit today about one of these funding strategies that we have currently in our area through EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. This is a map of the focus area. This project just started last year, and it was something that came out of a partnership that we've been part of in that area for over 10 years that's called the SWCD-Coho Partnership. This is a group of, it's the SWCD Watershed Council and the SWCD SWCD, as well as a number of federal and state agencies, Forest Service, BLM, NOAA, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, Mackenzie River Trust, and the tribes, both Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians and Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and SWCD Indians, who have been working together for many years on coho salmon recovery. They worked with the Wild Salmon Center to develop a strategic action plan for coho recovery in the SWCD and coastal lakes areas. And then out of that have been developing restoration projects. And then a couple years ago, got all their forces together to apply to the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, OWEB, for what is called a focused investment partnership. So this FIP is a big ask, big money, and they were, I think that they had actually applied once before and were not successful, and then in 2022 they were awarded a $12 million 6-year grant to implement this plan that they had developed. So the focus is on both tidal wetland restoration work as well as more upland floodplain restoration. Kind of, they've done a lot of analysis of what the limiting factors were for coho populations in the area, and a lot of that had to do with having enough juvenile rearing habitat, as well as eliminating, barriers to access and stuff. So a lot of this work that's happening now is figuring out ways to enhance and increase the amount of habitat. And what that looks like is often large wood placement, getting those gravels in for better spawning habitat, but then also creating, kind of reversing the effects that have happened over the last 100 or so years of stream channelization and simplification, trying to make them more complex habitats again like they used to be, where the stream is allowed to come up and access the floodplain, have those off-channel habitats, have a much more complex system that really produces more food for the salmon and also gives them refuge during high flows or hot summer temperatures or whatever. So what we did was to develop this strategy to help supplement some of the funding for these projects. And so we are looking at funding projects in these identified priority sub-watersheds in the SWCD River Basin and the coastal lakes area. So the coastal lakes area is what comes down here, Taconich and Siltcoos Lakes kind of basins. And it's a 5-year strategy. We're looking at pasture and hayland, forests, and what we call associated ag land. That's sort of just the, riparian areas, wetlands, whatever, that are near farms but aren't actively being farmed. And our priority goals that we're trying to, or resource concerns that we're addressing are the aquatic habitat, water quality, preventing sediment from going into these surface waters, and then degraded plant condition, trying to get the native riparian and wetland plants back there to do their function. So, as I said, we just started this last year. We had one application that we were able to fund. It's a pretty big project through this partnership with a lot of other folks and a lot of other funding, but the NRCS funding is going to some wetland restoration and a lot of the vegetation work. So I just wanted to show you some examples of what that looks like. This is the excuse me, Siletz tribe owns this property. It's on the 5-mile arm of Taconich Lake, and it's the first property basically above the lake. And they had worked with the Forest Service, who's done a lot of restoration on that other upper portion. up here. This is the 5 Mile Bell area that the Forest Service has been working on restoring for the last 10 years, kind of in sections. So now the tribe is working with a lot of those same partners to do a similar thing downstream, with a little bit more of a wetland focus because it is wetter down in that area. So what they're doing is called a stage 0 restoration. It's where rather than trying to come back in and say, oh, we'll look at historical photos, try to see where the historical channel used to be and redesign that. That's kind of how stream restoration went for a while, back 20 years ago. Now the more recent experience and science is showing that we're not that good at trying to engineer those systems, and it's actually better if we let nature do it. And so what that looks like is filling in the channel, flattening it out, kind of removing the dikes and areas where the floodplain had been built up, and just letting the water access the whole floodplain again. It'll create its own braided channel. They put in a lot of trees, large wood and stuff to keep it from just, all washing away in those first couple years, and then just plant it like crazy. They're, sticking so many willow stakes in there, all sorts of native upland plants on the sides, wetland vegetation, and they're gonna, keep on monitoring, maintaining that for a number of years, but let the system kind of figure out its own flow again. And I just have one picture. It's a little hard to see. This is looking from, you can see at the bottom there, that's kind of the upper edge of Taconich Lake, looking up into the valley. Oh yeah, that's close. So you can see that this, the bottom part is the kind of mostly native vegetation, wetland, but as soon as it starts going up the valley there, the stream is very channelized here. Here it was pushed up against the edge of the valley. Here you can't see it because it's pushed up on the edge on that side of the valley. This was all, historically homesteaded and grazed. And now it's just basically a reed canary grass, invasive monoculture, and doesn't provide a lot of, it's no longer grazed. It got too wet. And that, the grazing operation was abandoned, I think, at least 50 years ago, but also not providing a great wildlife habitat. So by filling in that channel, allowing more back channels and stuff to form and getting the native vegetation back in there, they want to really restore a lot of function to it. So this last summer was the first in-water work period. They're going to have 2 more years, but this is just one picture that was taken by a drone this fall after a big rain of what part of the restoration looks like. And it obviously looks really messy right now, but you can kind of see what this was the stream channel before. So there's still a bit of the remnant dikes there. This was just a temporary road that they had to build during this restoration phase, and then this coming summer they'll finish taking that out. But you can see, rather than the salmon only having this little channel here, now suddenly they've got access to this whole big floodplain area, and they're in the upper 5 Mile Bell restoration, they saw fish come into those within a couple years. It was just amazing, the recovery of the insects. They've got like a ton of dragonflies up there, all sorts of other stuff, and then beaver moved in too, and that's really what they want. The beavers are the great natural ecosystem engineers. They start plugging up channels and moving water around and stuff and create what's going to be the long-term system there. So this is a work in progress. Can be several more years of lots of really heavy hands-on work, and then just some kind of invasives control and stuff and monitoring over the next 5 or 10 years. But it's been really fun to be part of this project. This has been many years in the planning and making. But this is just kind of one thing that we're doing with this, we can also do much smaller scale projects of just kind of more traditional riparian planting, stuff like that too. That's all I've got. And I can answer any questions.
What do you fill the channels with?
So with the material they've got there, a lot of what they do is go in and scrape the reed canary grass material and dump that down at the bottom of the channel. And then in some cases, they're bringing clean fill from adjacent forest areas to put on top of that. They've found that if they bury that reed canary grass deep enough, it doesn't regrow. And so they've got a little bit of like moving stuff around, and they will have some kind of fill piles on like upland edges where they have to do some, but they're trying to minimize the amount of like trucking fill in or out.
So how is that supposed to enhance the salmon growth? Because the salmon need gravel beds and stuff in those headwaters and stuff to spawn. I mean, how is it?
Yeah, so this isn't headwaters. This is pretty low in the system, and it's mostly for the juveniles, the young fry, who just need a lot of food, basically, and areas where they can get out of the really high flows during the middle of the winter. So it's mostly juvenile rearing habitat, not the spawning gravels that you would find up higher in the system.
Was that picture taken off Maple Ridge, or was it on the bottom of the 5 Mile Road?
I think that last one was downstream post restoration. So the restoration started at the top of the property and is moving its way down. So it's not all the way down to the lake end of it.
Has the tribe made a declaration not to log that? Because they own both sides of that timberland. That's second or third growth timber in there. Are they gonna not log that anymore?
I don't know actually
Will
about.
that affect that? All that work that you're doing on that wetlands?
Yeah, I assume that they're coordinating. It's all, this restoration effort is under the Department of Natural Resources, and they're the ones that manage all of that forest land. So I think they still have some forest land we can see there, but all of the whatever kind of purpley gray area is their tribal forest. So there might be some units that they can still manage more actively for timber, but other ones they're probably leaving more for habitat.
And how will that affect, because CBR has about 21.5 miles of railroad line that goes right along that Annex where that wetland is. How is that going to affect the railway?
I don't know how close the railroad is to that. There is a road that goes along the edge, and the design was to not affect, it's not going to flood the road. They have enough relief already from the road bed to be able to inundate the floodplain. It's down low enough to not impact any infrastructure. There's no bridges or anything like that in that area. Thanks.
Energy Trust of Ordinance here, I think, right?
Yeah.
What's your name?
My name is Caden Craig.
Good deal. Yeah, you had emailed me. You found it.
Yeah. Better late than ever. Got a little slowed down coming across through that pass between Gene and Forest. They're still working on restoring power up there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just here to learn about the commercial farming situation and give any information to anybody who's within our service territory, or I can also do my card and thank people with grants from the federal level as well. I just can't directly give information on those.
We're glad you're here because we do have a kind of an energy component
Okay.
of some of our funding. So folks usually you know, if they're upgrading pumps or VFDs or different things, with probably some direct links with you guys, so.
Yeah, definitely.
Sweet. Wallace, take her away.
Yeah, so my name's Wallace Jennings with the NRCS. I'm the Urban and Small Farm Specialist. I essentially cover the gray area, the Central Coast Upper Willamette Basin. That includes Douglas and Josephine counties. The Environmental Quality Incentive Program is the same program that Annie was talking about, but essentially goes to assist with the landowners to meet resource concerns. The conservation initiative strategies essentially is kind of think of it as a way that we just fund programs, but the environmental quality incentive programs have these what we call CIS's conservation initiative strategies, and so I'm just going to go through one of them. Andy just talked about one, so I'm going to talk about a different one. This one's with local foods initiative. And its primary objective is to help with those communities for the farm fresh produce. So any of those ag communities like cheese, meat, vegetables that go to the fresh market, or CSA's, community supported agriculture. And there's 3 resource concerns that we're trying to address in the strategy, which is organic matter depletion, plant productivity and health, and essentially like pollinator habitat. So any of the hedgerows or like beetle banks that would have beneficial insects on grazing operations or vegetable production. These are the practices that are included in the strategy. So those include things for soil health, some irrigation, grazing management, high tunnel systems, and all this is available online if you want to look at it later. We just went through our first application cycle for the strategy. So the strategy is for 2024 through 2029. The deadline was in November. We are going through those applications currently as we speak. And then all the producers that applied, they're registering with the Farm Service Agency for eligibility, and then everyone's assigned a farm track number, and we're looking at like March 29th for like a pre-approval deadline. So that's kind of our cycle. And then this is just some information for applying with the Natural Resource Conservation Service. You would submit an application, include a map, get in touch with a conservation planner, and then kind of go through the process there. For establishing eligibility, you would work with the Farm Service Agency, and then these are some of the forms that you would submit to the Farm Service Agency. We'd work with you as a planner to get all the eligibility paperwork so you can participate with the USDA programs. So it includes any of the programs you're working with. Are there any questions about that strategy?
Can you go back to the list of practices?
Oh, sure.
I'm curious from the local folks, as far as local food production, food pantry, looking at it from that perspective, what's good, what's working? What would you like to see better in the community related to getting locally grown food fiber to the farmer's market or the pantry? What's working, what's not working? Yeah.
From this list, I would see like the sprinkler system and the high tunnel system so they can grow from the ground. So if we can only access fresh produce in the growing season, and here directly on the coast is very short. Inland, it's a little bit longer, but if they don't have some sort of greenhouse or high tunnel and the sprinkler system so that they can maintain it through the droughts and different things like that, we can't make a partnership. We currently, just let you know right now, we have substantial funds for the next 2 years to buy local produce, and I can't buy local I have to go all the way to Roseburg to get local produce. And one of our fixes is using Cisco, which is a big corporation. But they're the only ones currently that we can get year-round produce from. The produce can change. It doesn't always have to be, the same produce, but we need local farmers because we have the funds to support that. Another thing that I noticed with our farmers market is that the local farmers were very small farmers and could not make enough at a farmers market. Our farmers market was not robust enough and has just gradually shrunk in size over the years. Took a respite and is now back. But they have the same thing. They're going to Roseburg to get produce. So our local produce is 90 miles away. So there's cost, fuel costs, the insurance goes around that, time, labor. It becomes very expensive to get produce. So I'm here today looking for ways to support those local farmers that are struggling. So we have substantial dollars. We wrote a grant for social determinants of health, which is healthy foods in our community, means less doctor's visits, less emergency room visits, and we want to support local businesses through that program and not have our dollars go out of our community.
How many producers have you been working with who see bringing stuff to the farmer's market, or you're being able to purchase?
So there was only 2 local farms that I knew of, and one of them I believe is no longer, and the other I don't have contact information for, so I haven't even been able to reach out or find. I don't know how to find the farmers. And the ranchers too. We need ground beef. We need basic, the ground beef and the chicken. We have monies to purchase those as well.
We looked into several farmers in this area, ranchers in this area, looked into doing a beef co-op. And if the paperwork was so outstanding, and we couldn't get any help from, I wouldn't say you guys probably weren't around back then, you guys were all in Vegas when we were trying to do this, but it was just so, so tough to get along. And we couldn't get anybody to come out here. We have a meeting up at the Grange up Smith River, and the person that was supposed to come help us didn't show up because the roads were bad or something. He didn't have the right tires or some bad good things. And, we're not big by any means. We're not a Harris ranch. We're a bunch of small cattle growers. But it takes so much time. Like right now, we had one of our local butchers down in Bandon, his place burned down, a meat cutter. And they've been dealing for 6 years through the USDA and different state agencies to get their shop built back up to be certified so they can start doing, we're out a year in advance to get the mobile ranch butchers to come butcher and then take it back and process it. And by that time, there's no extra to sell to, like, Susan and places like this because you've waited so long. My next butcher date, I'm going to do 7, and it's in November, which is way too late, really. But, I'm burning a lot of fat off of them steers by that time. But it just takes so damn long that they're not helping, not just the ranchers, but also the middlemen that are producing, that are, taking care of the meat stuff so that we can have that available for these places. So, I tried it since then, and it's so aggravating and so confusing and takes so long that the process needs to be, I think, needs to be simplified. Look at it, all those in there, it's like, oh my gosh, quick, give me the cup of coffee and pour the baby in to help you get through that.
Yeah, you'll need it.
Yeah.
Our agency does focus mostly on the property itself and looking at you to try to make it as successful as possible in dealing with any resource issues. But part of that is often helps create a better quality beef. That you can improve the grass on the land, through some rotations or nutrient management, different things like that. Your issue here has a lot to do with availability at the right time, and then quantity of produce and meats you can tap into.
We would buy small amounts if you could buy local.
But you're only thinking of 1 or 2 people right now
That I know of, but what they grew was so limited. If, you know, like if you only grow mushrooms and have chickens and eggs, and that's basically what you produce, that's not enough variety from us. We would definitely buy those things from that local farmer. But we distribute, just a little background. The Reedsport Food Pantry went to open distribution in 2016. The year prior, we distributed 36,000 pounds of food through the pantry in 2015. And since 2016, we distribute 200,000 pounds of food through our pantry, with a wide variety of that being produce. The largest amount that is I would say perishable, so it's dairy, meat, and produce is the largest amount, not the processed macaroni and cheese and all those things. And so we are really focused on those high quality, healthy foods. So having farms that have all the land that's supported with all of these things is very important to us. Because if the waterways or if the lands aren't able to produce those regional foods, that impacts us. And so the dollars that could be spent making sure that the Glover Farm is well equipped are now going to fuel and labor to go and get those items. So where do we want to put our dollars? We want to support locally.
I definitely would like to follow up this conversation. We would come back again, talk more specifics and all this year, and Michael talk through this niche. Randy had a kind of a wetland restoration fisheries niche for that project. This one, we have funding now to help producers do some of these practices, but it would be nice to see that it's going to be used or help that aspect of it.
Very interested in the coho rehabilitation and actually having that. We have one local fisherman that donates, does a matching program every year, and that fish is caught right off of our ocean and produced here, and that's exciting and exhilarating to see that happen. But one year we offered as our holiday protein, you could have turkey, a ham, or a whole salmon, and they went crazy for the whole salmon. That is better food than the turkey and or the ham especially. So if we had somebody who was a local producer that we could purchase seafood from, during the holidays, it wouldn't be a year-round thing. It's quite expensive. But so all of this is very interesting to us. And I know out of, is it Newport, that they received a very large grant to keep those fisheries local?
Yeah,
So that,
yeah.
so that it doesn't go into like the national or international food hub, because like our restaurants are now, when they go to that, they're buying fish from who knows where. You could be getting the same type of fish from Boston that you could be getting right from here, but it's the only way you could get to that food. I would like to see that work that's happening at the Newport, but also be focused down here so that we can keep those. Instead of knowing, you have to know when to be at the dock. And if you don't know the right person, and you can't get connected to the right person, and if you don't have the labor to be down at the dock at the 2 hours that they're selling it, I think there could be more connection, not just with the pantry, but with the local restaurants. We have a farmer out in Oakland that we had a connection with, and for several years donated a hog every year. We're not looking necessarily for the donations, but like we would take a cow every year, or we would take 100 pounds of ground beef, every other month or something like that, to make sure that we have the ground beef in the building. And that's important. We have a high school pantry that we run, and those kids don't want all these fancy different foods that we get in through the Fresh Alliance program. So we get filet mignon and we get ribeye steaks, but a high school kid just wants a pound of ground beef because they know what to do with that. They don't know how to cook a steak. So we have a high beef for like chicken breast or chicken tenders, the ground beef, and then produce. Dairy, we're always short on dairy.
Is there a List County like small farms extension?
Yeah,
that works out
Logan
here?
Bennett,
Yeah.
he's a great guy to work with.
You might have more connections.
But that's typically the Roseburg area.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. And so we have to go to Roseburg.
Yeah.
So it's cheaper for me to buy off a system because they deliver it right to me. And I don't have to pay somebody and have all of the expense of having the box truck go to Roseburg.
You know, and we're small over here. I mean, we've got some big ranches here. Cliff's Place, Mike Mass Place, I'm not so big, but, the Daily Place, the Black Place, you know, Georgia. But, you know, to get the help that we need, I mean, and my son cares less about ranch. I'm gonna leave my ranch for the grandkids. And, I'm 69 soon, and my dad's 85, and we're still doing it the same way when I was 12 years old. And we don't look to the USDA or anybody else for help because it takes so damn long. By the time you get all that paperwork filled out, hell, your haying season's over, and it's time to start weaning your calves off and putting them on feed. So it just takes, you know, it's so convoluted that you can't sit on your butt, take that time to do all that paperwork because you're out there taking care of the land. And, you know, you talk to people and say, yeah, I'd like to make a difference. And they look at you like, oh, your 125 acres ain't much. You know, we don't have time to mess with you because you're so small. Well, you know, what about my 42 head of feeder calves? I'm going to be hauling to a feed lot somewhere over Silver Lake or something. You know, then what do you want to do? You'll be down to it. You know, it's just, we're so small over here in Reedsport. People don't realize that, you know, the availability of the land that we could be utilizing, and it's just because it's just too, I mean, if I had a secretary, that might be different, you know, she could do all the paperwork, but my wife was my header, and, you know, and I couldn't get her to sit down in a chair and do paperwork either. She was out there taking care of cows. It's just, you know, we need to make it simpler so that, you know, producers have time to do the things that Susan's talking about, the stuff petition and present to us, you know, and stuff like that. So.
If I can add on to that, Carrie, community organizations, so not just food pantries, but community organizations struggle with the same thing. So you might have a community organization and pantries are typically run by just volunteers. And it'd be much like you, it's like you only have so much time, or there's only 4 people, and it takes all of your efforts just to run the pantry or run that community organization. You don't have time to go out and learn how to write a grant or learn how to connect with others or apply for these federal funding. What foundations have done is they have worked to supply grant writing classes and how to form collaboratives and how to work. And it can be like a 101 webinar on something. Maybe that's something that this group can work towards, where there is a resource library where folks can go on. It's like, this is how you answer this question. If the reports are anything like a federal grant might be, it's very daunting. And, you know, I've got to get up at 5 a.m. to feed the cows, or, you know, I work until dark or 7 o'clock at night. I don't have the energy to expend on figuring this out. I can fill it out, but I don't have time to learn a new system. So if there is some sort of support around that, community organizations have proven to be more successful in their grant applications and their collaborative efforts when there is that support. So I don't know if that's something that these organizations that are here that are represented would find a niche for that or not, but having a resource library and having a contact person that you can ask questions to, a real person, not just keep going, help, and it's not answering my real question, helps make community organizations vital in a rural community. And I'm speaking mostly about rural communities, not urban communities.
I can, a couple things to touch on. The paperwork that we deal with landowners to do this particular program, in 10 minutes I can get you through the application cycle. I'll tell you how to answer the questions on it. Really, figuring out what to do on the property takes more time. I like to tell people, we need to take a year to make sure we plan it. I mean, it's not for some of this planning, it can take forever. But some of these things, you already have some ideas in your mind. We just need to get it on paper, map it, develop a contract, So I like to say, let's take it, you can sign up now, but don't expect funding until a year from now.
Yeah.
The other part I heard you say was like for the meat part of it, processing. You're missing processing capability local, right? So that's, I mentioned that resource, RC&D councils, we used to staff, we no longer do. They used to help this piece right here, this butchering part. They used to go after funding for the community to create butchering, things like that. Well, that's kind of gone, so we don't necessarily do that. But that's something the locals think about to talk through, because that is a missing piece. It's like, well, if we help you implement a system related to grazing and producing more beef or poultry, what are you gonna do with it? You need to be able to do something with it to get it. So there's a piece there that our partnership we could build around this, figure it out. We can work with you directly on the lands and trying to get things in that respect. And then on your end, the purchasing side of it, there's another leadership that's already in place to figure out, connection. Right? There's got to be more producers out there.
There has to be.
And
I would hope so.
if we identify those and tell them, hey, we might be able to help you on the production side of it. We're not supposed to necessarily help with production, but in a way, a lot of these practices do. Maybe we help fill a niche. But that meat part, that butchering and local, that's an issue that I don't know. I'm not an expert at that, but maybe there's somebody that it is.
Well, that's what I asked about extension, because in Lincoln County, we do have a small farms extension, a new one, just for the last couple of years, and she's been real active in finding grants and helping folks apply for that kind of stuff. Setting up a small butchering operation, getting producers the help they need.
Well,
I was just gonna add that, there's other USDA agencies out there, and even like we spoke briefly about rural development, they're another agency that I think they have some programs around meat processing and some other ways.
Yeah, so I know there's some assistance in probably every one of these issue boxes, so to speak. But I would like to finish this, continue this conversation to try to see what we can do there.
I'd like to add one whole more piece. I know you want to get moving.
No, that's fine.
I don't want to speak for the farmers here, but with community organizations, somebody has to be accountable to be the placeholder for all this information. So expect a farmer to know that when they have this issue, they go to this department, when they have this issue, they go over here, and then this is available and that's available. They're not going to remember all of that. So you need an organization, or whether it's a Grange, or I think that more to Rhonda's plate, but somebody that holds all this information that they go, okay, I can just go to this one person and ask this question, and they're going to direct me in that area.
Well, it's kind of sad because, what was it, Rhonda? 4 years ago, Reedsport decided not to buy into the extension service. So now we don't get the state extension, the county extension service capabilities. We have no 4-H here on the coast anymore. So we, if
So
you're.
that impacts the public more than it does the organizations.
Well, I mean, but you stop and think about it. My son had to go to Elkton because for 4-H and FFA, because we didn't have it reached for. So once a week, until Bo was able to drive, I'd drive him to Elkton for 4-H and FFA meetings so that he could have his market animals, steers and steak and whatever. But we don't have that now, and that was helpful because we used to have the little gal from the extension service come over here when we were doing, we'd have weed day and stuff like that, but you can't get that here anymore. So, you're on your own when it comes time for your hay production and stuff, and trying to, do that kind of thing, because of that.
So Carrie, you live out of the city limits, so you can actually access extension. And like Shelby, Philby, the OSU 4-H specialist, she could actually come out to your place. It's just in Reedsport right here. So that's where we kind of really messed up, whoever voted on that, the powers that be, and excluded expansion from the city of Reedsport. It was due to tax base stuff. And that's why our recent soils class was held in Winchester Bay. It kind of just set us out a little bit. And, but everybody that lives just outside the city of Reedsport can access all this.
Oh, that doesn't stop us. So we have a larger service area, so then we qualify. So just because we're a community organization that's in Reedsport, we serve outside of Reedsport, so we have access to it. So it really, in my view, what I meant was, it just really impacts the public here from accessing that, having master canners and different things like that come over. We just have it in Gardner or Manchester Bay.
Good conversation, we'll keep that going. Why don't we drop into yours, and then I'm sure that'll prompt some more discussion here. Again, if I didn't tell anybody, there's restrooms through that back door. We didn't bring any snacks at all, did we? Nothing. Okay, this should, yeah, just arrow down.
Okay, and if you could just, you can
Scroll
scroll,
with you. Okay.
yeah, should be able to use this right here. One or the other, either way. Okay, so I'm Rhonda Black with Umpqua Soil and Water Conservation District, and I work for the soil and water, but I also keep bees at home and have a small farm. That's a picture of the Umpqua there. And, oh boy, that's hard to see.
Want me to turn lights down, or?
Yeah, somebody asked.
Is that a right
appreciate
switch?
that. So, our district takes in the northwestern part of Douglas County, and it has about 600,000 acres. And it includes, the lower Umpqua, Winchester Bay, Gardner, Reedsport, Elkton, Kellogg. It goes part of the way towards Drain. So it takes in a pretty good area, but it's just all over here on this northwest portion. And so there's a map that shows the full Douglas County, and then we're up over there on the corner. And then the rest of the county is Douglas Soil and Water. So our county has 2 soil and water conservation districts, ours here, and then Douglas Soil and Water. And in the state, there are 45 soil and water conservation districts. So those with 2 soil and waters include, Douglas. And then there is Grant, Josephine, Lake, Lane, Multnomah, and then Baker has 4 soil and water. So they really, have a lot more there, but they have a lot of agriculture going on over there too. And so both Umpqua and Douglas offer the same kind of programs and services. So that's good too. So keeps it pretty familiar. And then we have 5 directors. One of them's here today, Cliff. And then we have Bob Miller, and our zone 3 is vacant, and that's the Kellogg area and Elkton area. And if you know anybody over there that you think might want to serve, just let us know and let them know. We'd be happy to fill that position. And our meetings are held on the second Thursday of the month at 6:30. And we're online, so it's pretty accessible. And so soil and waters are funded through what's called a capacity grant. And it's very similar to what watershed councils have. They come through the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board. With this grant, we're able to provide all kinds of agricultural best management practices. So, to do with farming, and to do with like fish. Just trying to make the land better. And we provide technical assistance to landowners, and they don't have to be landowners out in the country, they can be in town too. So whoever needs help, we can give them a soil test, or they might have some backyard chickens, we can help them with that. But then we can help farmers and ranchers too. And just got to be there to provide assistance in whatever way we can. And if we can't answer the question, then maybe we can contact somebody who can. So think some of you might know that I reach out and say, help me. And right now, we have, of course, the technical assistance to district landowners. And we work down in the estuary, and so we're working on tide gate projects. We have well over 50 tide gates here on the Umpqua and Smith River combined. And those are starting to fail on us. Because they're pretty old. They were put in the 1930s, 1940s by the Army Corps, and then the Army Corps passed off management to the landowners. So that made it kind of hard for them to keep up with maintaining them after a certain point. And as time went on, tide gates became more expensive to maintain and replace and that kind of thing. And the rules changed for fish passage, so that became a lot harder to navigate. So we're doing that, and then we have presentations and tours and workshops. And so like last weekend, we had a OSU soil management class. And then we had a focus area on the lower Smith River and on Otter Slough, and we just closed that out at the end of June last year. So that was good. It was a focused effort through ODA. We have what's called a weed wrench loan program where we load out weed wrenches to people for $25 for 2 weeks, and it's refundable, so they can get that money back. They can just borrow one of our weed wrenches and go out and do all that manual labor. It's, like I say, it is hard work, but it is worth it in the end because you can visually see all the stuff pulled up. And then we have a website that's been, well, we had a website before, but now we have a new one. Same address, but much improved. And a Facebook page, which is pretty active, so if you ever get a chance to go there, check it out. And then we work with our partners, NRCS and the watershed councils and Douglas Soil and Water, and we're in part of the Umpqua Oaks Partnership. So if you are up by Scottsburg and east, that's where most of our oaks are at, and we're part of that partnership, and we can help through that process. And let's see here, the National Forest, and we're part of the Umpqua Native Plant Partnership as well. So that's recently been formed 2 years ago, so that we can go ahead and help people try to find native plants, and we can try to grow native plants through the partnership. And so that's in process. And we have our local stewardship group, the Umpqua Dune Stewardship, and we can access some of those federal funds for you have the National Forest, and then you have the off-forest funds, and those are for the properties just beyond the National Forest, but you might want to put an ag practice in or some kind of practice, and those funds can be used for that. It's got to be connected to the National Forest. And let's see here. We have our own South Coast Tide Gate group. And so that's been something that's been going on for a little while and is getting bigger and growing. And yeah, there we go. We're just starting to partner with the Port of Umpqua too on a Tide Gate project that they've got going on. So what we have going on for right now is we need to recruit for one more soil and water director to bring us up to 5. And we need to bring back our Umpqua Estuary Restoration Partnership. We had that going on and it kind of fizzled out during COVID, but that was our Tide Gate partnership locally. NRCS and National Marine Fisheries and Army Corps and local watershed councils, groups like that, we all came together and we met about, once every 6 months. And they offered us their input on our Tide Gate process. And that provided us with some support that way so that we could know that we were doing the right things. And let's see here, we just need to do more weed management. We don't have a weed program. We are part of the local weed group out of Douglas County that was recently reformed with Douglas Soil and Water. But we don't have like our own process, so we need to find a weed grant of some kind. And we need more capacity. So, but we're just going to keep going forward and keep doing the work we're doing and, add to that. And So we do all kinds of things, just like most soil and waters do, and sometimes with the help of NRCS, which is good. And so runoff management, heavy use protection areas, livestock exclusion fencing, off-stream watering, crossings, livestock access roads, manure storage, and tide replacement. And try to encourage people to take their livestock off of the fields in the winter and put them in a heavy use area or a sacrifice area to make it so that the livestock don't punch holes in the field and create compaction. These need to be encouraged more. And put in a heavy use protection area. And the hard thing is to find money for these. So right now I've been accessing small grants program through OWEB. And things are getting more expensive. And we get up to $15,000 per small grant. Our team is a local team through Douglas County. So it's Douglas Soil and Water, Elk Creek Watershed, Smith River Watershed, our Soil and Water, Elk Creek Watershed, and that is our team. And we might have a few tribal people this time too, which is good. And they review our grants. The whole team reviews the grants, and then we decide who gets to have a grant, you know. And this is one way we can fund these. But if you try to add something else to it, like let's say you want a fence around it, then the price starts to get to the point where you almost can't do it. So it would be nice if we could get a little more money for our small grant teams in the future. And I know they're discussing that at OWEB. This is a heavy use project and livestock exclusion fencing that we did. It's been a few years now, but it was up on Sheep Ranch near Elkton. And you can see there where there was a lot of water there by the culvert, and the roadway there, and in front of the gate. It just was kind of mucky and gross. And afterwards, a nice crossing going into the field, and it cleaned up the area there where there was actually a NRCS grass waterway alongside of it that ran down the side. Can't really see it here, but at the time it was getting filled with mud right there. So that helped that farmer out. And then here a few years ago, we put in this one here for the spring development exclusion fencing. And this is by Kellogg. And you can't see it from the road, but you can kind of see the road going up there. And there was a seep there, and the picture on the left shows all the mucky and erosion that was going on there. And that was actually running out and going onto the highway there on 138. And so we fenced it off. We put in a new cattle guard and a new fence and some off-stream watering for the ranch. And that improved everything significantly. It's all clean now. You don't have to see the water running down across the road there. It doesn't do that anymore with the mud. This is a off-stream watering project that was put in over by Mill Creek Road, right, just shortly after you cross the bridge there. And anyhow, we did a spring development there, and then we also did another where we pumped water right out of the Umpqua because there were water rights there. And so we went ahead and pumped that out and put in a couple of these nice troughs. They were hardened underneath, and they were run by solar, so that's pretty handy. And this was a fun little project. This was to stabilize the Umpqua. It is in a area that right there on 38, right before you get to Elkton, and there's like a little housing development there. And the landowner was having problems there because his house is right there on the Umpqua, probably 500 feet away. And the boats kept going up and down the river right there, the fishing boats and stuff, you know, they were doing their recreation, and they were creating such a big wake that it was eating away his bank in front of his house. So we went ahead and we put in these little wattles, and they work. And what they did was, is as the stream caved off, their willows were growing there already, and they just grew up through all of that and just kept growing. It just kind of kept everything back, and then he just kept adding to his project. And he got really excited and added native plants to the stream bank and go above it. He has quite a thing going on there. And then we do our soil testing, and yes, I wish I could take it countywide, but I just have enough for here for our soil and water. It's free. I can come out and collect the samples for the landowner. I prefer to do it that way, but they can bring it in too, and I can meet them somewhere and get their soil samples. We use a certified testing lab, and that way they get really good results, and they also get told everything they need to do. So works out pretty good. And there's our Reed Wrench loan program, and that's my kid right there using one when he was little.
Right.
Yeah, look at him. He was.
How many did he do?
He probably did more back then than he does now.
Oh, okay.
But last summer I paid him,
Oh,
and I paid both the kids last summer. Yeah, they went out there and cleaned up a big section. But it's just an ongoing battle. There's just so much stuff to do. And then we have our tie gate program. And so what we have here are a couple tie gates. They're the old style Waterman flap gates. The one on top is missing the gate entirely. And the one on the bottom is working. And at that point in time, they had 2 rusted culverts on them. And they're just marginally better right now. They were re-sleeved. And we have better tie gate options available these days. And so this was a project done by Coos Watershed. And so if you're going on Highway 101 towards Coos Bay and you're at Hauser and where that RV park is at, you can look down there when you cross the bridge and you can see those tie gates right there. So they're much better. They're side opening. They provide better fish passage, of course, because they are side opening. There isn't any of this flapping down real hard. It, reduces the velocity of the water going through so the fish can navigate it easier. It does perform a lot better during high flows. And they can stay open during some of that flow too, which puts more water out. And they have what's called a muted tie gate regulator on them, and that sets a level for the water level of what can go through. And then we have Mr. Glover's project right here. This was done in partnership with our Soil and Water and the partnership from Fall Rivers, the Watershed Council in Roseburg. And this is still ongoing, but the tie gates are in place. It had 2 round cast iron tie gates, and they were replaced with 3 side openings, and 2 of them were side by side. And much bigger tie gates, much bigger culverts. And so, but the process is still going. There's still a lot of channel work that needs to be done, planting, fencing, and some bridges need to go in. So, and Cliff, anytime you want to jump in and add to it, you can. Okay.
Well, it kind of coincides with what you're talking about, Harry. As far as fish restoration, providing area for the juvenile salmon, to let the fish come in through the tide gates while they're open. So these tide gates they're made so they just slowly open and close, so that it doesn't hinder the fish passage. But on my project, part of the water management plan is that we agreed on was that I allow 30 acres during the winter from November to April to flood for the fish. Then during the summertime, the water level was adjusted to where it's not flooded, it's just the water in the ditches and the pastures or the cows to go out to pastures. But once I'm talking, I could just mention that, like what Carrie was talking about as far as the meat production. I'm kind of I'm working on putting in a cooler in a cutting room. And basically, at this point, I was just considering, just for private use. I've got a couple sons that are hunters. But from what I hear here, it'd be interesting to find out what I could do to kind of work that into something that can provide local meat without a big hassle as far as, having to go, as far as I know, the nearest meat processor, mobile butchers are like in the valley, Oakland or Eugene, what have you. Sure, they can come out and like Ferguson saying, there's a big waiting list, you have to contact them 8, 6, 9 months ahead of time before they can come out. But, yeah, if we can get something kind of established here locally. I know my dad, when he was alive, used to, he had a cutting room set up, and he'd have like the local butcher from Safeway, he'd come out. We had I think it was the guy from Van that he slaughtered them. Or who, I don't remember who's actually slaughtering, but or even we would just sell the steers on the hoof to the meat people who wanted meat, and they'd get slaughtered, and then we can hang them there, and you have the Safeway butcher come out, and he'd come up, and the people they would wrap their own meat. And that seemed to work out pretty good, but I'm not aware of what the actual rules and the regulations are nowadays, but to be able to sell to you, but it'd be nice to find out.
They have to have the USDA certification. Is that what it is from the food producer? So the fish industry, they have a form that they, with the donation, because that is a donation, they give us their form stating that it's state authorized, commercial production.
So I'd have to have my facilities USDA approved, and the meat, whoever's cutting up the meat would have to be certified properly, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm not an expert, but, USDA and possibly FDA, there might be more than one, even state-related stuff. You're talking about all the paperwork, but a lot more paperwork probably involved in that than anything we do with just conservation practices, so. But that'd be good to know exactly.
But I think once it's done, then it's just whether it's your annual or biannual inspection, make sure your facility is still meeting those requirements. And it's food safety.
Right.
It's just food safety.
So I guess what I would need is to be able to find out what I would have to do from whoever.
I think a lot of people would be interested in that. I know that my family's been interested in that too. I mean, what are the rules? How can we do that? And same with you. So, and that's what happens is you get stopped, and then you just go, I'll just send it to the auction yard because you don't know what to do. You've got these things get to a size, these animals get to a size, you just have to sell them. And if you knew the ins and outs of the rules and what you could do, it would be like you had somebody who could butcher right here that was USDA certified, like what you're talking about, then it would be much easier to just transfer that right over. But when we don't know it, it's like right now, I know I can do half a bowl. That's it.
And it's healthier beef.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I brought my bucket bulls home after the national finals. I got a bull that needs to be butchered. I mean, he gets the best food. He gets an exercise program. He's a 6-year-old bull. He's going to make the greatest hamburger in the wide world. I mean, he's mostly Angus, but he's got a little braver in him. So he's going to be lean, very lean. But, he's not bucking well enough to make any money, and he's not even good for a breed bull. So you call up and say, hey, I'm going to have 1,400 pounds of hamburger. Well, I can sell that in a minute. That's $3 a pound, tomorrow. But you call the butcher and they go, oh yeah, we'll see you in December.
Yeah.
And you gotta go.
2025.
Yeah.
You have to go.
So yeah, so there, you just call up your local friend up there on the road on Cedar Street and say, hey, Mike, you got room for 1,400 pounds of hanging beef? We're gonna make hamburger out of it. you know, those are the issues. I mean, you can do everything you can do, you guys helping out with quality pasture and, you know, rotation and all that, fencing and waterways and stuff. But when it comes down to the final product, which is beef raising, you know, our hands are tied and we're sitting on our thumbs. So.
How's this working for them?
Well, like Rena said, we got the tide gates in, but that's the initial part of the project in this late summer, fall this last year. And they're the type of tide gates that have the MTR needed, what did you say?
Tide gate regulator?
It's, anyhow, you're able to adjust the water level inside the dikes. So they're not actually set up to do that yet. They're just kind of set up to work as a regular tide gate. But like the next step in the project is to put in some bridges over the bigger channels inside on the ranch there. So it doesn't impede the fish. So that'll be the next step. And the channel, there's we bring in and clean out the channels and actually put in a new channel. But that work has to be done, and then I'll be putting in some fencing to keep the cows out of the channels as far as, you know, maintaining water quality.
So is those tide gates clipped and then are they going to control the runoff on your 30 acres? If you live on there?
Yeah, it'll bring the water level up a little bit, so it floods the lower areas, the 30 acres, which is that,
yeah,
mostly that area there in yellow. So, for instance, I think the water level is supposed to be adjusted to 5.75 during that time, from November to April. And then in April, it'll be lowered down to around 4. So water level reduced.
I got a question for you on your water management plans. How often do you take a look at those, and knowing that you're just getting into it, but is there kind of like that the plan's going to be reassessed after a few years to see how the water levels are doing? How long is that plan?
I don't know that will be reassessed. That's what's agreed on.
Yeah, I think that was like a one-time thing that the landowner can go back and have it adjusted if necessary. I think that's how that went.
Oh, okay.
I think the only thing that'll be adjusted will be kind of looking at what the engineer determined to be the setting where the water level actually achieves the number of acres flooded, whether it's too much or not enough or whatever.
yeah, because if there's still smoke in there after you drop it down to 4 foot, is was there any worried about water temperature in that golden area?
Well, the way I understand it, it's been during that winter, those winter months is when they be in there.
Oh, so they'll be gone by the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the channels will still be fairly full in the summertime, it's just the rest of the time, the winter time is when that water management plan will kick into a certain level of flooded for that section up there. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I know, I'm probably gonna get in trouble for using this, but when the boy was younger, he used to go down and catch a whole bunch of bluegill and stuff. We had an area there on the ranch where we sold them hunters. Oh, he was always trying to dam it up, put them bluegill and then perch in there so he could go down and catch some fish and come down.
Oh.
He'd have to go down to Lake Marie or something, and you just couldn't keep it cool. Enough bluegills in there to fish survive.
So one thing that was interesting, that far left red line there used to be one of the old tide gates where that white spot is there. And over the year, well, last several years, that tide gate just hasn't been functioning. It just be river water free flowing through there up until this last summer. And so that tide gate, they actually moved to a different, for the new tide gate, moved to a new lake location, which would be the next white dot to the left, right of there. So anyhow, they blocked off where the old tide gate was, filled in the dike. So it's, they had to do a, what they call a fish salvage process, where they filled that in, make sure that there wasn't any fish killed or hurt or whatever. And so they had to go bring some fish biologists and some volunteers in to catch any little fish that may be in that red channel where they're going to fill in the dirt. And they actually found, I think it was 21 ho-ho juvenile fish in there. So there are, salmon do go in there. So I think once it's all, project's all said and done, it'll help the salmon.
I think so. So, and these are the tide gates right here. This is when they were built, sitting up on the lot last March. And in May, they were down at Cliff's Place in the staging area. And kind of just shows how big they are. And here's some photos of them being installed. This is the two doubles that are side by side. And they went in, they started in September and finished early October. And right there you can see some pictures there and near finished product here over on this side, over on the right, where you've got the double tie gates and the flaps, the side opening, and then the MTR on the interior. It looks kind of mucky, but it hadn't fully dewatered yet and that kind of thing. And then here's that other one, which is a single, and you can see that the contractor's taking it out to where it's going to go. And then it got installed here in October, and that's showing the riverside, and then the lower what picture is on the inside. And that was just taken here a few days ago during high water, because it's been on high water. And then we do outreach and education too. So we have our OSU workshops here lately. In the past 2 years, we've been working, several years back with Shelby Philly with the manure management workshop. And then last spring we had another one, but we had it over in Roseburg, and Logan taught that one with, I can't remember her name. There were several people there, and we all, joined forces and talked about manure management. And then we went out on a field trip. So, and then here the other day, last Saturday, we had a soils management with Logan down here in Winchester Bay. And it was really nice having it be local. I think happens more often. People will get more used to the idea and we'll have better attendance. And here's that manure management one off to the left here. And we went out to about 2 or 3 ranches and went and visited their heavy use areas. 2 which Shelby had designed and helped put in, so it was good. And then last summer here, we went out to Cliff's Place and we had a free project tour with our partners and with some landowners. So that was good. Got to go out there and see things before everything went in. And there's a Memorial Day parade a few years ago where we went into the local Reedsport Memorial Day parade. Try to have a float every once in a while. So people seem to like it. And that's the end. You guys have any questions? All right, I'll change places with you.
Yeah, thank you, Rhonda. Can you hit that light again, Zach?
Hey, quickly, Rhonda, where do you advertise when you have those meetings, like the one you had?
Oh, let's see. I did it on the website, the Facebook page. I did it in the local paper here. Let's see here, I think that Logan also got it in the World. Yeah, it ran several times in our little local paper, full page.
You put it in
Yeah.
a newsletter and send it.
Yeah, I sent it in the newsletter, yeah. Yeah,
You get the newsletter?
I
yeah.
just started it. So, yeah.
I appreciate your input, telling us kind of how things are going. I'm curious, Annie's project, where it's kind of like very wetlandish, very habitat only use, basically.
Yeah.
Your project has got both. It's
Yeah, it's kind of cooperation for both agriculture and salmon.
how many years did it take to get to the point of installing the gates from when you started planning?
Don't ask.
Well, we,
Uh,
2016, I think we started
Yeah, it kind
talking.
of started for me. I think you worked on Tigers before that, but of course, COVID didn't help it at all. Kind of slowed things down, but yeah, since 2016 to actually getting Tigers was last summer. Hopefully, someone else gets involved in something like that, it would be quicker, but it seemed like during COVID, had a big problem. It seemed like a lot of people that were actually involved in it with the government agencies, like NOAA. That's when David Chang was, he retired about that time, and he was heavily involved. And they retired at that time, and new people came on. And it seems like that kind of slowed things down a lot.
It did, because let's see, we had our.
Not to say that you did.
Yeah.
I just walked away.
But,
I walked away.
but
Temporarily.
I can say that one thing that actually slowed down with, they got new turnover at Army Corps of Engineers as far as the permitting. And that, we got some new personnel in there, and they just came to a standstill almost. And we finally got someone turned over to someone else that kind of was more experienced in those sort of things, and it kind of things happen.
Yeah, finally started falling in line.
Yeah. But, yeah, that's the only issues why it took so long, I think. Otherwise, it'd been probably a couple of years quicker. It takes time for it to go through that permitting process. Because it's got to go through DEQ, fishing, federal fishing, wildlife, state fishing, wildlife, state lands, all those agencies have to, approve it. Just one thing I want to caution somebody is, have your ducks all in a row and your plan all in line before you turn it over to them, because if there's any changes after that, if it gets halfway through the permitting process and you decide, well, we need to make some changes, it basically has to start all over again.
Right.
So.
It's lengthy.
I know the district had done some years ago, identified like 50 plus gates like that, up and down the river on the Smith River and some on the Umpqua. So there's that. That's been a lingering concern thing to deal with, right? The land behind it, you've got either still viable grazing happening, or folks that have just kind of let it go and it's now become more marshy, wet, ungrazed, and the unmanaged. You got those types of settings. The other thing I'm hearing, I guess, is the pasture-based improvements, period. And we have, I was just gonna bring up, we've got funding for that now, under the Inflation Act funding, there's prescribed grazing, and then with that, fencing, the water facilities, heavy use area pads, there's things like that. Sign up today for next winter's funding. That's just been rolling out countywide, so, and there's a lot of demand right now. I think we got like 3.2 million-ish, and we've got over, how many million in demand for that program among our 7 counties or whatever?
One of the things, if I go through all the trouble and hassle of doing this, and I'm looking at next year, what's to say, I dedicate that time, and for my 100, say I got 100 acres along the river, 160 total. But what, if I start this, like your project you're doing, taxing it, will that come along and take precedent over my little 100-acre deal that I'm trying to do on my ranch? I mean, how deep am I gonna get into that only to be kicked to the curb because a bigger project's gonna take precedent? And it sounds like, that a lot of government agencies involved with, you involved the tribe and everybody else. I'm just a small-time cattle rancher.
If there's a multitude of things in that question. Yes, we have a ranking system. When we have, let's say, the eco program like this small, I always want to say small foods program. Local foods program. You might be in competition among 7 counties. You may not get funded. It might take a while to get funded. But once that's in place and you're doing that, I mean, you're in the driver's seat there. You're not necessarily in competition with funding that's gone towards estuary, et cetera. So we have slivers of budgets for different purposes. So we're not apples and oranges in that case. But we want to be careful that if we're planning improved pasture management, we start putting fences up and all these things. And then you think, oh, I want to do that type of project like what you've done. It might potentially, conceptually change things up. So we want to think about that in the long haul. It's like, where do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road? They're tricky. If you've got tide gates to fix, the funding to get that tide gate fixed might have more strings attached. Water management plan, flooding it during the winter. So you have to decide if you want to go that route or not. We're not going to force you that way.
Well, heck with me, my neighbor put in $95,000 for the tide gate. I just take the excavator and redo my ditches so everything runs right down into Dave's place and drains out his tide gate. I mean, that was the logical answer for that.
And I could be wrong, Kerry, but I think what he's asking is it competitive? So much like a grant writing would be, it's like, if there's 100 applications, what are his chances of actually being funded? Maybe not so much interfering with funding from another source for other things, but if he does the local foods program and it's statewide.
Yeah, there's a ranking process. So every year is a fresh ranking process. Every year you put your hat in the ring.
Would you have an idea from him to say, like, I'm going to put in for whether it's the local foods or an estuary program or a tide gate program? I apologize for not knowing the right vocabulary
You're
about
doing
things.
really well.
But what would I think what he needs to do is be able to assess whether putting in this energy for it is worthwhile to him if he's got like a 20% chance or an 80% chance of getting it. We recognize we can't be guaranteed the dollars, but like if I am competitive, if somebody can tell me I'm very competitive, then I'm willing to put the energy in it. But if I'm not competitive, if I'm not quite ready, then I need that resource, that support to put me in the position that I can be competitive.
2 things there. With the amount of funding we're getting, your chances of getting funding is good. The effort to put your name, to apply for the program right now is pretty easy. Spending some time with us to kind of plan it out isn't too bad. So it's a pretty positive, I hope, experience at this point, because we do have some pretty good funding coming down the pike. maybe even more money over the next couple of years for these types of projects. But the demand will increase. So I can't fully answer that question, but early comers are often rewarded more quickly than folks that come in late.
It sounds like it's similar to competitive grant writing through foundations and stuff. So if you can build those relationships and have those talks and go in strong, then when the funding runs out, you are set for when the funding is smaller and you're more competitive.
I just wanted to add, like, for my project, the project manager is Partnership for Umpqua Rivers Watershed Council. So they're the ones that go out and seek the grants and manage the project and, you know, apply for the grants and get the funding. But also with Umpqua Soil and Water Conservation District, you know, serve as that, provide that function as well, as far as seeking out grants and to do that sort of a project. So it's not like a landowner has to go out and spend their time getting grants and trying to figure that all out or anything.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and most of our stuff is that way, where you're in a unique situation where you had a lot of partners in order to get that permitting through, and they're very expensive gates. My shop doesn't deal with a lot of those landowners. We're mostly the high tunnel, the few practices, funding's there, you apply for it in 10 minutes, you kind of know where you're gonna put that high tunnel. You wait up to a year whether or not you're gonna get the funding, so there is a waiting game there depending on when you sign up. But that's the government. I mean,
Oh, that's all processed.
It's kind of like that with anything when you're trying to get grant money, though. It's like the small grants program. Sometimes, you know, you might apply to a small grant team, like you come to me and I apply for a grant for you and send it off to the small grant team and they would review it. And sometimes they review it and they go, not this time. Or there isn't enough money in our team left over, you know, sometimes because we apply not every other month. When our team is going through the biennium, you know, we're meeting and we're putting in for grants. When it gets towards the end, there's less money available. So, and then they might just say, okay, you know, you can either scale back this project or you can wait till the next biennium. And then I put in for it again in the next biennium. And then it would go. But there are certain things that happen and if the grant doesn't meet the requirements. We have had that happen with our small grant team. They'll send, you know, somebody will send, one of the watershed councils or something will send something to us and we'll take a look at it and it doesn't meet the requirements. But if they would add something or take something away, it would meet the requirements. So we might have to wait 2 months, just put the right things in the grant, and then it would go. So there's little variables in there. You just gotta be patient. And it can happen.
Well, like, yeah, if you think you want to do a project, you go to Rhonda and then she'll basically take it from there and you kind of have to have some idea of what you want to do. But other than that,
For the most part, the landowner doesn't have to deal with that whole grant process, either a watershed council or the SWCD or someone can really do all that paperwork and of it.
We could pull our hair out.
Yeah.
So if a guy wanted, say, like, for instance, I give grandkids the pumpkin patch. So their idea coming home is, oh, hell, Grandpa, let's do our own pumpkin patch next year. So if, under this farm bill practices, if I wanted to take upper 20 acres off my cattle pasture, do all new fences, new water troughs, all of that, and then produce, you know, some corn and some pumpkins growing on that to produce that pumpkin patch, do I have to have a business plan on how I'm going to, you know, sell that product when it's all said and done, or could that be the business plan, having all those folks walk through there and picking out their pumpkin and getting lost in the corn maze or whatever type of thing? I mean, how related does it have to be to the farm bill? If the guy's going for money to remodel my pasture, my corrals and stuff, so that I can do something like that.
with a lot of us that kind of step into that, we look at your current operation and look at those resource concerns. It's like, are there problems with soil quality, soil erosion, air quality, those types of things, and address it with what's there today. But if you're looking to change your business plan a little bit, well, we can work with that. If you're looking at potentially doing some small produce rather than just grazing, that's fine. We'll look at it the best we can and put what practices towards it that kind of meet those criteria. And if that puts some more local produce into the network here, that kind of fits in our small foods program or small farm or local foods. So we'll work with that. Well, there is a connection between your business plan, your long-term operation, and then how can our farm bill programs fit it. We just do it carefully and make sure we're not out of step with your planning. Because it is your conservation plan first. Because we're not going to dictate to you what you're going to plant, when you're going to, just trying to fit these resources with your business plan over the years. Any other thoughts with?
I was just gonna say, like, just to sum it up a little bit more, you were asking about ranking and doing projects and stuff like that. David was talking about taking like a year to kind of plan things out. That's really trying to figure out what your objectives are on the farm. What are some of the natural resource concerns and put together, what do you call that, conservation plan, and having a well thought out idea of what you want to accomplish out there and what the natural resource issues might be. And then having a well laid out plan and seeing how those plans might fit into the various programs could in turn help you rank better to help you get money easier. It is a competitive process. There is a ranking process to help determine what are the best fit applications for the taxpayer dollars. So yeah, I mean, it is competitive, but having a well laid out plan, our programs are announced every year and try to be as transparent as we can with, how we're selecting projects.
Yeah, I think that's a negative myth that's out there because, way back, I was lucky enough to buy this ranch in '97. And everybody said, well, that used to be wetlands. Don't, I don't know, I was talking to somebody from the water or soil or something. And I said, well, I'm going to have them come out and give me a hand. They said, oh, don't let them on the property. You'll never get rid of them. And they'll always be dictating what you can do with your 160 acres there. It's like, well, hell, I got a shotgun and a dog that bites. I mean, what do I have to worry about? That's a myth that's a negative myth that's out there. It's, because I'm listening to some stuff that sounds pretty good, but, before I came to this meeting, I'd be, I don't want that. Maybe that's something that we need to dispel out there to get some help.
I have a first-hand example of exactly what you're talking about. Is a guy that traditionally had a pasture and he wants to have some sort of agritourism, grows particularly pumpkins. And the plan that we come up with right now is basically cover crop rotation, nutrient management, and it's hedgerows. And what that does, just to unpack you that real quickly, producing local food is a ranking point. Having nutrient management is a ranking point. Having hedgerows ranking point. And so within these programs, there's, let's say, 5 questions that you have to ask. So it's not a game, but you're trying to hedge your bet to get yourself in front the best you can by thinking about the ranking questions, how they affect the ranking, and how that are going to be helpful to you. Now, what I would tell you is just to counsel you would say, just because you're going to get ranking points doesn't mean it's going to be a good conservation practice and fit you perfectly. But in this example, this person's kind of getting off the ground, only growing pumpkins for a couple of years. It's a good first start. Get your nutrients in line, get some, good crop rotation and cover crop to help improve the soil health and quality. And then at 2 or 3 years, let's look and reassess this and see what's the next step. How do I help you or take you to the next step? And or maybe you got exactly what you need from us, and then you never use us, and you're the kind of customer that I want. Someone that basically graduates from the programs and never needs our help again is kind of my end goal. So that's just a real world example of one where using that list. I know it seemed long, but picking 3 or 4 of them wisely could pay well and get you to your end game, your destination there if you want. So each person's gonna have their own little story, their pumpkin patch, their grazing, their whatever. And so we're just gonna try to use those tools the best way we can and to help and service that person. And quite honestly, it doesn't always work for everyone. And sometimes the practices don't work and don't make sense and don't pay well. And, you know, we would probably suggest you not to sign up for the program if that's the case, but when it makes sense, it's a good program.
And through that process, you know, we have some aha moments. It's like, oh, you want to put in a new VFD or a pump or blah, blah, blah. Hey, did you know about Energy Trust? You know, if you want to speak to any of those types of things, what you're seeing happen for these guys, it can kind of couple with these programs. But yeah.
Well, my first thought is not exactly energy specific related, but I know there's this organization down in the Klamath Basin that's really geared towards connecting farmers with those resources because the farmers don't have enough time. It all started with like a farmer's daughter doing all the paperwork for him and then doing the paperwork for his neighbors. And eventually she just like started this organization. And I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But if you'd like, I could get you in contact just to share ideas on how they go about doing that. Sounds like that's a big like hindrance point here. But as far as energy related stuff, I know that not all of Douglas County is within the Energy Trust service territory specifically, but there are other grant programs that we can, like I have colleagues that work with other grant programs, so I can actually get you their contact information if you're interested in learning about those. Unfortunately, yeah, the Reedsport area itself is not within Energy Trust, but there are parts of the Douglas County that are. So I've got flyers. I was thinking of just adding to the stack back here at some point, and I have cards too if you want access, like want some information on those other grant programs. I can definitely get you in touch with some folks.
I want that information.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the local district here with Ron is kind of our hub. You know, I'm in Roseburg, but it's nice to be able to have things available to Rhonda for somebody to physically come get or have a quick go-to, and then we can go from there. But yeah, some of our funding is related to energy. You know, it's a funding pool called Energy statewide, dealing with efficiency of equipment, facilities, some of the on-farm stuff, even into the irrigation systems.
I can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah.
Really, most where the energy savings is, except for processing plants, but on actual farms, it's usually at the pump. So the incentive type, like the offering incentive, the types of things that we offer incentives for are like sprinkler packages that reduce water flow and VFDs on pumps. Sometimes like pump reconfigurations, or if you're installing a new pump, you want like a more efficient option than what would have been like a cheaper, easier option. But most of the energy that we're focused on is around the pump itself. So anything that relates to water flow or like pump speed, like that. But there are some other types of measures for like greenhouses. And I know that those other grant programs are a little bit more broad than our specific like pump energy focus. But I don't have as much information on those programs. I usually just get access to so a lot of sprinkler packages are popular because you don't have to do nearly as much paperwork. You just have to submit a pretty simple form, and we'll walk you through a couple basic steps, and then you'll sign a couple papers. You don't have to do nearly as much like the question back and forth. With more complex projects, like some of the pump projects, we'll just call and get a little bit of information about how pumps are used and like estimate the energy savings. Give you an incentive offering as well as like a report on how much energy you can sort of expect to see saved. I think that's all I got off the top of my head.
No, appreciate it. We do touch on forest land, the non-industrial forest. We do have some funding that overlaps, this area. Some thinning, piling, be more of a forest health, probably ecology reason over here versus wildfire, which has been a lot of demand, central and southwest. You know, we do touch cropland, which anybody, you know, going after a high tunnel or doing the produce, you know, that's a crop. And of course, the pasture land. That seems to be the main three for this area, unless I'm missing something. I know the CAFOs, you know, the animal feeding operations. There's a spot for that. I get a little bit more engineer. Any questions on our agency and potential assistance that we might bring to the table that we haven't talked about already?
So you're talking about improving, like raising nutrients and so forth. What kind of assistance are you talking about? Like I'm looking at restoring the fields.
I'm looking at the categories. A lot of the infrastructure, you know, creating a rotation that wasn't there. So the fencing and having water in those different paddocks. I'm just trying to see if there was anything else under this Inflation Act funding that.
Do forage planting, right?
Yeah, there's a planting right here.
Pasture renovation.
Even silvopasture. So yeah, pasture planting's in there. That's what I was looking for. Thanks, Annie.
Some associated practices like heavy use areas where you really money as part of the grant system. It's at water facilities, livestock.
Yeah, let me just show you this. This is probably a quicker way than a lot of those practices are in the screen, but that's kind of a list of practices. But the resource concerns, you know, why are we here? Is it aggregate instability? Some weird language in there, but you know, kind of focus down. And if we don't have the funding, you know, we're not the only game in town. So there might be things like Rhonda's been doing, but maybe she can pull together some other small grants.
So also, considering doing some acres of tree planting, like Douglas fir or whatever, is that something you help with, or?
There's an emphasis on plantings. There was a mention on the hedgerows, riparian plantings. What's the purpose of the Doug fir? In this instance, is it to create a forest or just for habitat or for shading or?
Basically for just another crop, you know.
For potential logging in the future? Yeah. It depends on the site, you know, on the species. We don't necessarily plant stuff for future logging per se.
Oh.
I've seen projects where we've done that inadvertently, but something to look at, yeah.
Okay, so like for instance, his project, Per had to reach out and try to get another grant because the funds didn't cover. Prices went up during COVID and the funds weren't there for some of the plantings and things like that. So now we maybe have some availability here to get some funds for the riparian plantings.
Yeah, I was looking at that and thinking,
Yeah.
we should reconnect and look at that plan and see if there's things that you still need to do in the plan that you don't have any support for.
Yeah, there's, you know, like Miranda was saying, that you're kind of coming up short.
Yeah.
Got fencing to do.
Yeah.
And then having said that, that's primarily like our environmental quality incentives program. That's kind of our working horse, deal is you get a bunch of stuff done and then you walk away. There's a conservation stewardship program, 5-year contracts that does the enhancements. It does some add-on. You know, what else can we do for wildlife? What else can we do to enhance it? You know, there may be a few things in there that might make sense for a project like you. We've made so much headway. At some point, that might be a useful program. So when I'm talking to you, I'm thinking, you know, different programs I might have. Not telling you, keep it secret. But I'm thinking, what fits here? You know, and then I'll spill the beans, and I'll hopefully have an aha moment. It says, yes, I'm going to do that. So, but it takes some time to figure out, will this program actually work?
Yeah, another thing is, we kind of looked at the equip for, fencing along the channels. You know, you have to have like a 35-foot setback or whatever. And at the time, I didn't decide not to do that, but I kind of like to take another look at that and see what my options are and benefit would be.
Okay, yeah.
When you do this stuff like Cliff's talking about, though, does it have to be permanent fencing, or like, you know, before I ended up fighting this cancer, I used to use electric wires and rotate my cows across 100 acres, and then use, you know, portable electric fence to keep them where I wanted them. And then when it's time to rotate that pasture a little bit, I take the fence down, move the cows up, put the fence back up. You know, is there, and then go back and look at maybe helping that grass grow a little quicker, planting some grass that, you know, some pasture that's going to, you know, produce, you know, a high value, high nutrient type of grass quicker. That's be able to keep them cows off of it while I'm trying to get that. Does all that have to be on a permanent basis, or can you utilize those like fencing and stuff for pasture rotation and stuff?
So we typically want permanent fencing in for the places that make sense to be permanent. But through your prescribed grazing plan, if you've got some electric fence that you're using seasonally within that, that's not really directly paid for, but under a prescribed grazing plan, you know, there's some incentive dollars to help put towards your management of moving animals within that pasture where you're creating paddocks. Yeah, it pretty much needs to be sitting there. And what's the lifespan of a fence post? 15-year lifespan for our posts and T-posts, you know, whether it's barbed wire or multi-wire electric fence. But that management of movement cattle within that permanent fence pasture, and you're creating paddocks, you know, there's some incentive dollars in a way to give you to do that. So maybe that helps offset some of that time and management, maybe some of that cost of the electrical hardware. I'm just thinking out of the box there a little bit.
Well, I was looking more like assistance in helping planning and assistance in, you know, doing my, you know, my reseeding of my pastures to get a higher quality, higher nutrient pasture. But happened to utilize portable electric fence, you know, so because I mean, to put in what you're talking about, post and T-post and that type of thing. I mean, where we're at, I mean, hell bells, one morning it'll be there, and the next morning herd of elk go through it. You know, it's all laying on the ground. You're out there with your axe and your chainsaw, and you've got kindling up the logs.
Okay.
You know, so.
We do pay for electric fence.
Annual electric fence where you can just keep taking it down every year.
It's portable electric fence. It's in our standard.
But it's attached to some probably permanent fencing to run from. We need to look at that. We'll look at that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It's got me kind of intrigued.
So Beth has her hand up.
Oh, good. Beth.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just had a few, sorry I couldn't make it up there in person, but I'm glad I could join remotely. And I just had a few things, you know, from ODA's water quality programs perspective, you know, I guess our priorities would be, you know, riparian protection and restoration and planting, you know, things like off-stream water systems and that kind of water quality protection type of projects. And then also, of course, the tie gates and the habitat behind the tie gates. You know, so those would be some of our priorities. And then I just heard someone mention elk. And then there are more and more people doing like the elk jump fencing. So it's like this wooden structure just in like known locations where the elk are like to come through. And the landowners are saying it works really well, a lot of the time, unless the elk gets spooked or something like that, and then they'll just stampede. But for the most part, they use the same paths, and so you can have these hardened like wooden structures in these pathways. And so Coos SWCD is using those, and then 10 Mile Lakes is using the Watershed Council there is using those. So anyway, just an interesting thing. And then I heard someone talk about Klamath, and that, I think that they were talking about the woman, Kelly Delpit, that works for Sustainable Northwest. So that's a group that you guys might be interested in connecting with, from in your area, see if they can, work with you in any way. But similar to kind of what Kelly does in Klamath is kind of, the SWCD can kind of act like that sort of conduit as well. So gathering information and letting people know what's available and that sort of thing. So that's a potential thing, a way that the SWCD could help the community also. And then another thing is the SWCDs can really kind of generate interest in these types of programs like EQIP and CISs and that sort of thing, and generate interest with the landowners, and kind of line up the landowners. So they can kind of line up landowners and projects, and then direct them in kind of a grouped way, sort of, to NRCS. So I've seen that happen, and I think that it's my understanding that the NRCS likes it that way, because then they kind of have like something to ask for funding for. They already have things lined up and kind of organized, and landowners that are willing and to do the practices and projects. So those are just kind of some ideas on how the SWCD locally might be able to help. And then like Cliff said, while I'm talking, I just have there was earlier comments about the food pantry. So I put some things in the chat. So like OSU Extension Small Farms, but also ODA Market Access. They have people that work with in that, like doing a lot of the things that she was talking about. And also EcoTrust Fisheries and Farms. They also do a lot of the things that the food pantry woman was talking about. And then there's also ODA, or Oregon, I should say. There's an effort for local meat butchering and processing. And so I put a link to that in the chat. Or you can just kind of Google ODA local meat processing, and it will come up as well. So anyhow, those are all my thoughts and ideas and notes and things. So yeah.
Would you share the first resource that you said for the food pantry? I got the ODA Market Access. What was the one before that?
Oh yeah. Well, OSU Extension Small Farms. I think someone else mentioned that. ODA Market Access, and then EcoTrust Fisheries and Farms. So you were talking about salmon and local fish, and they do a lot of that kind of work. So there are some other models, I think, up and down the coast, where they're doing like local fish for local people kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing.
Thanks, Beth. So that kind of coming to our closing, where to go from here? So there's a few things I heard, some of the barriers, getting available food to the local need here. On farm improvements, I mean, that's what we do. On pastures, a big one. There's a lot of tie gates related to those pastures, so that's complicated, but we can still continue to step into it. There's components of that. There may be some forest woodland associated with those lands that we can look at. I would like to maybe through the district here have a little bit of a local few people just hash this out a little bit more and see if we get some more landowners involved. See who's out there willing to maybe do some high tunnels, do some simple things. Just start simple, you know. And then from that, we could, like Beth was mentioning, we could create a specific strategy for the Reedsport area for our equip dollars, to where I get a budget for that. And then you're only competing amongst a smaller group of people.
Yeah, that would be better.
So we can spin it that way. So there's some ideas there. So I want to pursue that.
Yeah, and that would be great to jump in there. I've been working a lot with some of the food hubs and then some of the initiatives so we can do some of that work. I'm involved right now in Southtown, Corvallis, and they have a study going on with the grant. They come up with some of the food hub components, and then to put in a plan for the needs of the community. And so it'll be something like similar. What I'm thinking you're missing is really like a food hub and the data that supports kind of what you guys want to do. And then you can go after things like value added grants through road development. Just kind of how they fund those. That's kind of where you guys are at. So yeah, it'd be really cool to hash those things out.
That would be good. Yeah.
So I would say within the next month,
Okay.
we should set something up, gather a few people up and just kick this around some more. Other ideas to pursue, specifics?
I'm not sure.
I mean, that's a big one right there. And I think that covers a lot of things, because that's, you know, your food and fiber, your produce, your cattle, your chickens, whatever that is. It's all mixed together in a way that touches those lands and fills a local need, or attempts to. Meanwhile, I do have applications for, if you guys want to actually fill out an EQIP or even a CSP application, we can run that through you in 10 minutes. Then you walk away for a while and we'll connect it to you a little later. You know, there's no cost to that, it's free. Not yet.
To kind of get you in the system.
But, you know, in doing that, you know, in the position you're coming into, you know, you can tell somebody, hey, this is what I did. This is how easy it was, you know, or whatever. You can comment however you want, but that's helpful for the next person that walks in the door, and you can relate, oh yeah, I did that, that wasn't bad, or here's what you want to watch for. So, is there anything you guys heard that I missed that we want to kind of summarize quickly? Thoughts?
Yeah, come back to your point earlier. The reason why my position was created was that the agency recognized that we haven't done the most outstanding job at reaching the small producers, small farmers. And so one of the barriers has always been paperwork. Like this year up in Benton County, I literally just went down to every farm and I really helped them with all their paperwork to make it real easy. So far, you know, fingers crossed, it's been a really good experience. A lot of the farmers who had trouble in the past, it's always been the paperwork. So we try to make it really streamlined, and the paperwork, I mean, you shouldn't even feel the effect of it. It's not hard at all. It took like, you know, a couple back and forth, but it's me just taking the paperwork to them and getting them to really understand what it was. And then once they understood the paperwork, okay, that makes sense. It's, you know, pretty straightforward.
So Wallace just volunteered to help you sign up.
Yeah, if you have a paper out, I can help you. It's not hard at all.
No, you probably need to get out of here.
Yeah, I was curious with Food Hub, if that could be sort of jointly organized through sort of a similar or same organization so that people know where to go for like food distribution as well as information resources. Like, I guess you sort of spoke to that a little bit first, but I was just curious if there's any other food hubs that do also information access for grants and things like that, or if it's considered sort of a separate like organization body.
You can make it whatever you need. Whatever fits Reedsport area, that's my mind. Let's build it to fit Reedsport.
Right.
Anyway, you know, not just Reedsport, but
You know, the whole area.
17 miles upriver, wherever your district ends.
Yeah, it sounds like a good opportunity to kill two birds with one stone if there's the resources for it, I suppose.
I mean, there's lots of small farmers here. I mean, the district takes in clear to other side of Kellogg, so almost to Drain and then to the county, Lane County border all the way. So, I mean, start getting everybody together. That's what I find is what has been missing for a long time, is just getting everybody on the same page. Like, seems like we all have some of the same issues, you know. Speaking from my own farm, I have issues with trying to figure out how to sell things. And, you know, how legally can I sell it? And that's some of the same questions you guys had too, you know, how do we go through the butchering process? How do we sell? How do we, you know, what's the inspection process? That kind of thing. So we just need some way to bring it all together to make it happen. And that's where we need to be able to provide to you too, the food pantry. We get stuck in a certain spot and we can't quite complete the process. So we just need somebody or a group that knows what to do. And it sounds like you're gonna know a lot of that.
Yeah, well, a lot of that's happening around the state right now. There's a really good example of, you know, the valley, or not the valley, the southwest.
Umpqua Valley Farm to School, but Oregon Farm to Schools program in general. I mean, there's a food hub that's in Douglas County. Again, listening to you, that doesn't help you much, but something to model after, right? Something to, you know, not to reinvent it from nothing. And then, you know, the power of the hub is the connection. So as we learn about the need and the issue, then we talk to Aaron and, you know, kick it down the road.
Before you two leave, I want to talk to you after, yeah, you two back there. I know Wallace.
Zach.
I know Wallace, but I didn't catch his, Zach, Wallace and Zach. But to add to what Ron was saying, we definitely need, you know, an area to meet and connect, but also vocabulary. Food hub to you might mean something than food hub to me. You know, so when we're talking about different things, it's just actually understanding what we're talking about and making sure that we are communicating the same way. And that would just be bringing two different types of industries or three or more types of industries together. It's just making sure that we're communicating what we're actually, because food hub might mean something different to me than what we were talking about. I already called my people out. I don't. Yeah.
Well, me personally, I want to thank you guys for coming over and sharing your stories, your ideas, and your plans and stuff with us. It kind of gives me a little hope.
Would you, anybody, I mean, we can go ahead and come down and visit you, or somebody, one of these guys out of my shop, can at least come over and just visit with you on your place.
Yeah.
So I'll give you a business card and then just pick a time. Same thing with yours.
It wouldn't be that easy. I'd lock the dog up.
And yours, looking at your place again. You know, looking at that, couple funding options for the fencing, planting, sounds like you still need. Okay. And then setting up, we'll talk some more.
Yeah.
So you and I will talk about setting up another more intimate meeting on trying to develop a strategy here for.
I think that's a good plan. That's a really good plan.
Yeah, because I mean, it wouldn't take but another year of feeding them wieners, you know, them calves, instead of sending them over to Central Oregon or Idaho to get fed, feeding them here and then, you know, butchering them ourselves for the, you know, $4.50 a pound and more than the $2.22 a pound I got for my 5 weights this year, so.
That was good.
Yeah.
Last year it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, that, and if there's, you know, changing my pasture grass and all that, I mean, that would help a bunch.
And Carrie, I just wrote a grant with an elk jump in it. So, an
Oh,
elk
you
crossing
did?
jump. So I'm gonna see how that works out, but I can help you with that.
Sometimes it's okay,
I was
but you
local,
always
right?
want a
Yeah.
little elk in the freezer. Find them hung up in the fence, it's pretty easy. You don't have to pack them while you run out there with the loader and pick them up and finish them off.
Well, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the Reedsport, Winchester Bay, the coastal Douglas County community. Even though those who are from out of town outnumber those of us from in town, that's typically what happens, I think, in rural communities. And it could be a good start, but these 4 people will tell 4 people will tell 4 people. And so these are, meetings are really important to have the face-to-face. So I really appreciate you traveling in the winter weather conditions as well, but it wasn't too bad out today. But to come and meet with us and give us your expertise and help us learn more about your programs. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for being here and being vocal and dominating our discussion. That was excellent. That's the plan. That's what we wanted. Yeah, so we'll follow up and go ahead and reach out to us specific, individually, and we can get something set up to come to your place or, come down and
Just, yeah,
start a.
be right here.
Yep. And thank you, other agency people, for showing up. And Energy Trust.
If anybody wants information, I put all the paperwork back here. I've got the cards, likely most useful for the Reedsport area. Since Energy Trust is right here.
And here's mine and Walsh's number on it.
Awesome. So I'm curious. I'm curious.
If you didn't sign the, I think everybody did. I think I got it. So, I don't need the agency.